Let's polish some things up with Twitter Bootstrap, and we've played a little bit with it. If you look at our application, some of our form inputs take on the little nice looking Bootstrap features, and our login button, it's just a little button. What I first want to cover is the scaffolding. If we scroll down a little ways to the default grid system, what the grid system is basically it's evenly separated. So if you imagine these are divs and they go right next to each other, so this would be a div with a class of span one, meaning it spans one place, and you could put a whole bunch of them in a row and it'll take up one slot. If you did div class span 2, it would take up 2 spots, and the same goes for 3 and 4, and in this example it goes up to 9. But the default is to have 940 pixels wide of a container, and you can have 12 columns. That would mean you could have 12 of these ones. Now realistically, I'm not going to really use 12 single containers, but it's there if you need it. Normally you might use something like a 4, a 4, and a 4 if you wanted 3 columns. So to get started, let's first make our main container 940 pixels wide. So in our project, go to public CSS style, and I've already changed this. Yours might say 980, but I'm changing it to 940. And instead of calling this wrapper, I'm actually going to call it container. And you want to make sure this is a class because we're going to reuse it a lot. You'll see why. And the reason I want to call it container is because in a lot of other examples they use the word container instead of wrapper, and it might make it a little simpler for you. So now let's go to our views, home, ink, header view, and this right here, I already changed it from wrapper to container, and I also changed the comments. These are very simple changes, so we don't need to go through them in depth. I also did it for the footer. I just changed the comments so I can keep up with it. And then in the dashboard, if you go to the includes footer, what we're going to do is actually change the footer tag to a div ID footer like this. So go ahead and change your footer to what this looks like, and then once you do, copy it, and in our footer view for the home includes, we'll do that as well. Okay, so let me close out a couple of these with Control W. Now right now I'm in the header home, and I'm going to change this to div ID equals header, and the closing tag will be div. And you may be asking, why are you doing that? The reason is because not all browsers are well versed in HTML5, and that is an HTML5 feature which would require us to load HTML5 Shiv JavaScript or some type of HTML5 Bootstrap in order to give that ability to browsers that don't have it. And really, to just have some divs with an ID of header versus just a tag name header, it's not worth it for the overhead of loading the script at this point. So we have our header. What we're going to do in the header is let's go ahead and just put an H3 around here so it looks big. And inside of here, let's say div class equals container, and make sure the H3 is wrapped in there like that. Okay, so we have a header which we don't have defined yet, and we have a container which should be in the center. So if I go ahead and refresh the page, we have Junior Dash, and you see it jolted over here. If I open my inspector, you'll see this container here is the class container, 940 pixels wide, and that's really the container that we want throughout the site. You see how hovering this is the same as this container, and we can do the same with footer to have everything consistent. So I'll go ahead and just copy this div class and go to footer view, and I'll throw this guy in here. Same thing we did with the header, and I think we're just going to go ahead and do that with the other footer as well in the dashboard. So I'll open this guy up, and paste. I can close a couple of these out. So what we need to do is have a header div. So header, I'm just going to say background of F2, 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 and that's kind of like a light gray. You get used to all these colors. You could say F5, F5, and I'm going to add a margin bottom of 50 pixels. So let's refresh, and now we have this in a nicer clean gray bar. For the footer down here, let's see what's going on. What I want to do with the footer is just text align right. Now you can use a class called I believe it's text-right, but I kind of want to just do it through CSS. So I'll make a footer. I'll say text align right, and I'm not going to add a whole bunch to this. Inside the footer container, it might be nice if we had a little separator. So I'll say footer.container. Border top will be 1 pixel solid, F5, F5, F5. Okay, and let's say padding top will be 20 pixels so that the text doesn't touch the line. And then let's just say color will be B3, B3, B3. So it's kind of like a soft gray color. And let me shrink this down. Okay, so we have just a soft little line there. You probably can't see it, but on your screen, if you put it in, you will. It looks kind of nice. So this little register guy here, what we want to do is make this look more consistent. So let's go to our main page of home view. Okay, and what we have here is a row like we talked about. This span takes over 6 columns, and it looks like we have nothing beside that. Okay, so I'm not sure we talked about this, but there's also something called an offset. So if I inspect this, there we go, span 6. So you know there's 12 total columns. We could make this twice as long, right? It's pretty much half the size. But we can also do an offset. So if I go here and I say offset 2 columns, I'll refresh, and then it's more in the center like that. Not too shabby. I don't have perfect vision, but it looks pretty centered to me, and I'll leave it there. So next, let's go look at that little register button here. I'm just going to cut this guy out. And one thing that kind of bothers me is that this div and this form is on the same live line when the form is actually a child of the div, so I'm just going to tab it over. Okay. And with that cut item, I'm going to paste right here the register link, and I'm going to say class equals btn, and let me show you where we are in Bootstrap. If I go to base CSS and buttons, okay, when we add the class button, we'll get this gray button. Otherwise, there's a bunch of other things like register and all that. So let's see how that looks. And that says register. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with it. The form looks a lot cleaner to me. So let's click register. And I think we'll do the same thing with this form and give it an offset of 6. So if I go to the register view, I'm sorry, an offset of 2. Save that. And let's take this backlink and put it back by the submit button. And we're going to take this form again and tab it over since it's a little child there. Might want to actually tab that div over. Let's see where this div ends. Oh, that's a dynamic div. My mistake. I can tab him over. So back down here, I'll just say class equals button. And here, let's change this from back to cancel. And refresh. Okay, so cancel, register, cancel, and it looks like these might need a title up here, so I guess we'll throw something up there. If we go to the base Bootstrap, we can look at the typography, and these are just the heading tags. It doesn't have a whole lot here, just some font sizes and stuff. There's a P lead, which is kind of like your lead paragraph, if you wanted that. So I think we'll just say probably a H3 tag would be good up here. And so I'll go to the top of this register page, and I'm going to put it inside the form and see what happens. The only problem is that this form is kind of indented out, and you'll see what I mean. So if I say H3 register, I'll refresh. Let's go to register, and you can see how it's nudged over because these labels are this long, right? It's still in the same grid, but register is like way to the side. So I'll just test something and see if I can double click H3 down here, and I'll say class equals text dash right. That didn't seem to go in, so I'm going to do it manually. So I'll say class equals text right, and go ahead and refresh. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing for login. This is just to kind of differentiate it all. So the home view up at the top in the form, and I'll just change this to login. Let's refresh. Okay. And the last thing for this video is a Google font. So I'm going to go to Google Fonts. This makes it a lot of fun. And there's just google.com/fonts. And you could really pick from a wide variety of fonts. There's one that I really love called Ubuntu, and I'm going to use this one. You don't have to. Well, heck, I'll use the condensed version. And let's see, this little one with the arrow, I'll say quick use, and I'll go down a little ways, and here we have the font, and I'm just going to copy it there. And rather than import it in a link tag, I'm going to import it through CSS. So at the top of here, I'll say @import URL, and I'll paste it in there. Make sure you have your quotes and stuff. And what I'll do is I'll say body. Actually, I don't want to change the whole body font. I kind of just want to change the heading tags. So I'll say H1, H2, H3, H4, H5. Font will be, I'll just copy what was on Google Font family, like that. Okay, so if I go back and refresh, see now we have a little bit more interesting of a font, and that'll wrap up this video.